Hello and welcome to the Solo RolePlayers podcast. Today on the show, I'm very excited to bring you my first look at a brand new game delivered to me by my favorite post person who keeps bringing me RPGs. And that game today is Daggerheart by Darrington Press. Daggerheart, to anyone out there that has any sort of awareness in the industry, is probably not a strange name to hear. Even me, who is not, ironically, that plugged into the, D&D mainstream part of the hobby, even I knew about Daggerheart and even had a reasonable impression of some of the mechanics before going in, from listening to people like a friend of the show, Mike Shea, and seeing it pop up on various videos online and that kind of thing. I also have a friend who GMs a lot of stuff, and he was very, very excited about Daggerheart and waxed lyrical about it to me when I hung out with him on the weekend, and even pushed stat blocks in my face on a PDF and showed me how cool that was. And immediately it started triggering my brain about how this could be good for solo play, potentially. And so I had just received it a few days earlier. I was going to shelve it for a while because I have quite a lot on my table and plate to get through. But with that recent excitement from my friend, shout out to Gownie, I decided to pick it up and have a bit of a look. Now, today on the show, as you will see in the title, this is another one of the first look format episodes. And I'm sort of refining these as I go, as I do for everything. I figure out the shape of it and how it works by just doing it. And so this is not actually an unboxing per se, but this is developing into more of a way that I show you how I set up a new world, set up a new adventure, and learn a new game, and my process that I do that, which has been pretty similar. I just never noted it down or thought that hard about it. I just kind of did it. But now that I'm doing it on mic, I can see it forces me to kind of put my thoughts together a little bit. And this is a really great format to do that. So I think I've landed on the goal of these formats, of this first look format, is three things, essentially. The first thing is to give you a bit of an idea of what this game feels like, what it feels like to play, a bit of what this game is, what it's about, some of its different ideas that it has, all through the perspective of a solo role player, so that you can decide whether it's something you want to invest more time in finding out about. The second is to show you my process of how I learn a rule set of a new book, actually, and how I combine that learning of the rule set with building the world and the setup for the adventure that I will then go ahead and play in this book. And the third thing then is exactly that. It is giving you an introduction to what the actual play and what the ongoing story, if I like the game and continue playing it, is going to be. So that's sort of 2.5 things that I want to do in this kind of a format. So without further ado, let's open up for a first look of Daggerheart. So the first thing I like to do is set aside a little bit of time. Usually, if I can get to an hour, that's good, but sometimes I don't have an hour, and that's okay. So maybe half an hour, 3/4 of an hour, something like that. Make a cup of tea, and then I sit down in the Cecil, German speakers might get that as a joke, and pick up the book, open it up, try not to look at anything much, because as soon as I start looking at pictures and things, I start getting ideas about the world and the story, and I don't want any of that just yet. My goal for that first sit-down session is to just really cover the dice stuff. I don't want to look at characters, I don't want to look at settings, I don't want to look at art, I don't want to look at anything much other than just that really core mechanic of how the dice works. Obviously not only the dice, it could also be a little bit about exploration or that sort of stuff, but actually even not that, because exploration, I learn those rules when my story takes a point where they need to explore. So really just how the dice works. Is it a D20 system that you're rolling to hit a target number? Are you rolling under? Do you have a dice pool? Just basically read through that and place myself in the mechanical mindset of what sort of a game that is. Daggerheart took a little bit longer then, perhaps, in that regard, because it's different from a lot of the standard affair games that you get. So I go through that and I just get a feel, without reading it too meticulously, but I get a feel for how I can picture the mechanical flow of the game so it doesn't stop me in its tracks immediately. Then I close the book, and now I used to then go up to my desk and put music on and start kind of building a word, but now I come and sit on the microphone and talk to you about what stood out to me in those rules as being interesting, possibly different, and what things could be really useful and beneficial to the solo role player. And it is those things then, having pointed them out and thought about them from the perspective of the solo role player, those are the things that I find I then naturally lean into more, which does then support more of the solo play. It also helps me understand how I'm going to structure my play. Am I going to play a single character? Am I going to have a character and a companion, 2 full characters, a table full of level 0 meat grinder, DCC characters, whatever it's going to be. And there might be certain things in this book, which will trigger or at least inform you of what might be your approach for your first attempt at this game. So I'm just going to go through now just the main key things that stood out to me in this mechanical rules part of the book. So it'll give you an idea of if it might be worth looking into for you, and also give you a bit of a setup for the kinds of ideas that I'm brewing as I do this, as I start to build out a solo focused adventure for this game. Because, if I didn't mention already, this game has no solo rules. There are going to be many ways that you can solo it. If you have your favorite system, like Mythic or Plot Unfolding Machine or whatever it happens to be, you can just dive in and do that. I'm experimenting with different stuff at the moment and sort of will decide what I'm going to use based on how this sort of setup goes. So, brief overview of what some of these interesting things that stood out to me for the solo role player. Apologies for the dog barking in the background. The lovely neighbor Laurie, I think is the dog's name, could be Rory. Beautiful little Dalmatian, still a puppy, and his mother is now in the house less, and Rory or Laurie is a bit upset about that fact and barks the whole time she's away. And I feel very sorry for Laurie. I'm very understanding of dogs and dog upbringing, but it is a shame it features in my podcast now. I'm sorry about that, but Laurie is a good boy. Or girl. The first thing I want to point out is Daggerheart is a very pretty book. It has a very cartoonish high fantasy feel, which is exactly what this game is supposed to be, I'm pretty sure. So it sort of nails that. It leaves you with no mistakes about the feel of this game. I think by looking at the front cover, you have Kermit in a pirate hat, you have someone flying through the air in plate mail and wings, you have wraiths, you have horned humanoid warriors, you have looks like a necromancer type thing. Like this is high fantasy, big adventure sort of stuff, and it does not hide from that fact. It is a very, very nicely published book. 2 ribbons, love 2 ribbons, and as we will soon see, it is laid out in a really, so far at least, in a really nice way. I had no trouble at all finding the section I need to get to, which is usually chapter 2, after character creation, and how to play the game. You probably know all the background on this. This is developed by the Critical Role people as an alternative to D&D, and you can see already that DNA in here. They are a very narrative. I haven't watched any Critical Role particularly. I have seen the Vox Machina stuff and really like that. But clearly, and from what I know from popular culture osmosis about them, is that they are very big narrative, exciting stuff, and that's clearly a focus for this part of the game. And I think they do say somewhere at the very beginning, this is a big, let me see if I can find it. This is a big narrative-focused, high adventure. What kind of role-playing game is Daggerheart? Heroic, narrative-focused experience that features combat as a prominent aspect of play. The system facilitates emotionally engaging, player-driven stories punctuated by exciting battles, and harrowing challenges. Fiction first, encouraging players and GMs to act in good faith with another and focus on the storytelling rather than the complexity of the mechanics. It is nice that it knows what it is. It is not shying away from what it is. It knows exactly what it is, and that is a good thing. Also saying that it features combat as a prominent aspect of play. This is important because people who I think have only played D&D where combat is a really huge focus of it can sometimes slip up on that in other games like in the OSR where combat sometimes is really not a focus at all and could be a fail state. It means you've done something wrong. So it's nice that it puts that out right at the front. So an interesting point that first caught my eye on the first page is it's giving a little bit of information about the flow of the game and a bit of a feel for what it might look like. And it just said something here that I just think is a good reminder for everyone, GMs, but for the solo player as well, because we are GMs too. It says, and this is talking to the player here, but it says, in turn, the GM will ask you questions and build on those answers to create the fiction based on how the dice rolls go out. And it tells you that as a GM, you should be asking questions. If someone succeeds a sneaking roll, ask the player, how do you sneak around that corner? Now, this seems obvious, I think, but I don't think that means people actually inherently understand that or do it in the way they play, especially if you're starting out. And especially as the solo player, where you're playing both roles often, I think that's really important to understand when to constantly break, and not maybe break's not the right word, but constantly be reminded or remind yourself throughout rolling dice and stuff, not to just get tied into the mechanics, of course, unless that's where you have your fun and then go ham, only do mechanics all day. That's the great thing about solo role-playing. Go nuts. But to constantly try and flip into that player brain and storytelling brain and describe what you are doing, like what the roles mean, basically. And so I just thought that was a nice little piece of advice there. The first rule that stands out here in the core mechanics is the initiative mechanic. Now, this has been talked about. You may even know about this already. It is maybe controversial. I don't know. I don't care. But it's basically that there is no set rules for turn order and number of actions. But basically, and this really, really, really leans into the fact that this game is about telling an exciting story and not so worried about, how many actions you've done or how many rations you have in your bag or that kind of thing. I don't think it's particularly worried about that. It really wants to focus on those big cinematic scenes that you can picture someone swinging off a chandelier, that kind of thing. This is really highlighted by the spotlight mechanic, which basically means that in a group game, it is the person's turn who makes sense in the scene for it to be their turn, right? So someone comes in and they are trying to sneak and they fail the roll and the guard spots them. Then bam, it is probably the player's turn who failed the roll. Probably, it might be the guards, but we'll get to that. Because they are the focus of the action. The spotlight is on them, and then the combat and the initiative just sort of starts. And it kind of doesn't matter how much you do. You don't have a set amount of actions. You're just reminded to make sure that you pass the spotlight around between other players, and you basically keep flowing and doing what you want until something happens, which is part of the dice mechanic, which we'll get to. And when you do that, and you either fail a dice roll or your fear dice is higher, that is when the GM steps in and the world takes its turn. It might be those guards, it might be an earthquake, it might be losing your footing while climbing up a mountain, but something happens to break that heroic flow of what your characters are doing. And that's something that when I read that, I thought this could be really, really great and interesting for solo play, because it allows you to be in the mind of the player as you are. I'm going to jump up on the chandelier and I succeed with hope. We'll get to that. And swing off the chandelier, and then I jump down and I kick the guy in the chest and I knock him to the ground and succeed on that with hope. And then I get up again and turn around and do a roundhouse kick and take out the guard coming up behind me, and then fail with fear. Bam, my flow of character is interrupted, and the guard grabs my foot and pulls me to the ground. swinging me along and throwing me underneath the table, and I slide underneath the table, and then another character is coming in and doing something else. So it allows you to try and to tell the story in a big, elaborate, exciting way, and then have, bam, points where the focus shifts back to the GM and back to the world pushing back against you. And I think, A, I think that's a really interesting mechanic for an RPG, but B, I think it could be really fun and interesting in solo play. It also was the first hint that made me think, I think I want to play this with 2 full characters rather than one and a sidekick, although that would probably work still. I don't know, something about this made me feel like I want to do 2 full characters, which was clinched. Is that how you say it? The clincher for this thought was another rule in here, flipping forward a little bit, which is the tag team role. And once per session, each player can choose to spend 3 hope, which is a currency that you get, we'll get to that, to do like a massive tag team action between their character and another PC. And when you do that, you basically, it's kind of like a teamwork crit almost. I mean, it's not quite a critical, but it's a big teamwork thing where you're doing double damage, and you might be flipping off the shoulders of your ally and landing on the, whatever, that kind of thing. But it inspires this really big 2-character scene, which you could do once per session and could be a real highlight of the scene. Also, a really, really fun idea for playing at a table, to really have those moments with other characters that are just really memorable and help bond you and the other player, and also the characters together. That's cool. So that was the thing that clinched it for me, that I want to play this with 2 full characters, which is something actually I don't think I've really done. I usually go for 1 character and a sidekick type character, or a simplified companion type character. Anyway, we'll see how that goes. The next thing, and I probably should have started with this, but it doesn't matter, you've probably heard about it anyway, but that is the way the actual dice resolution works. Now, this is you roll a pair of d12s, adding them together to try and hit a target number, so an armor class, essentially, or a difficulty rating. And that's fine, that's totally fair enough. It's interesting in the fact that it creates a bell curve rather than the massive swinginess that is a d20, which can be really fun and can also suck quite a lot if you have bad luck rolling a d20. So I like that. That is, anything that gives me a curve where the probability is skewed, I always like that in games for some reason. Maybe that's just me. But the key thing about this actually is that you have 2 different dice colors, one representing fear, one representing hope. So when you roll, so you have a target number of, say, 15, when you roll your 2d12s, there are 4 possible outcomes. You can succeed with the hope die higher, which is succeeding with hope. You can succeed with the fear die higher, succeeding with fear. You can fail with the hope die higher. You can fail with the fear die higher. Now, those 4 different states is a really, really interesting concept. It's actually something, I use something similar in my own Oracle that I've been developing. Not from this game, actually. That was more from Sundered Isles, which does a similar thing where the color of the die flavors the result. But it's a really cool idea because it gives you both that familiar roll to hit a number mechanic, but also gives you this idea of a strong hit and a weak hit, kind of, plus more. Plus, it's building a economy and currency by doing that. Because when you roll with hope, when you succeed with hope, or fail with hope for that matter, you get a hope point, which is a currency that you can spend to activate various actions or get advantage or that kind of thing. And when you roll with fear, then the GM, or in our solo roleplayers case, the world gets a fear token, which it can push back against you to make negative things happen and sort of interrupt your heroic flow. This is really interesting. I'm really excited to play with this. I'm not going to go too much into it, but what I can see as the key mechanic in this for the solo role player is that I can see myself using a system where on every roll, I'm also rolling a d10, say, and if I roll lower than the number of fear points that the GM has or the world has, then it triggers one of those fear actions, and I can even roll randomly on which sort of fear action. So make something negative happen to the environment, for example, or the enemy makes an attack, or whatever it happens to be. I haven't looked that closely at that yet, but I can really see this as a I can really see a way to use what is already in this system for solo play, and that always excites me. If I can use what's already in here and sort of tweak it and look at it from certain angles to use it for the solo play, that's what I like. That's cool. I'm out of a few other notes here about how like damage works and stuff. I'm not going to go too much into it. Damage is interesting only because it's less maths, I guess. You're only going to take 1, 2, or 3 hit points worth of damage in any given attack, and that's based on a threshold. So if the damage is less than 8, you'll take 1 hit point. If it's more, you'll take 2 hit points. If it's more than 16, you'll take 3 hit points, that kind of thing. And so it just means it's easier to keep track of. You don't have this dial of 87 hit points and then rolling a handful of dice and trying to, subtract 35 from 8, whatever it is. It's just going to be 1, 2, or 3. It also makes it quite elegant how armor works as well, where you can basically just cross off a piece of your armor point. Your armor has a certain number of points to knock down the damage to the next lower bracket. So if you took major damage, severe damage, which is 3 hit points, you can cross off a piece of armor, and it's only going to be major damage. And it kind of doesn't matter then what the armor is. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. How good the armor is just how many times you can cross something off before it needs repairing. So I like that. That seems like a nice, elegant thing to do. The next thing that stood out to me that I think is going to be really fun and interesting, both in a group game, but especially in a solo game, is that it has a death move, the way that death works. If you die, you lose all your hit points, and can't remember if something else happens as well. When you mark your last hit point, you must make a death move. And you can choose how you're going to handle your death, which is really nice. Really, really nice. The first option is you can go out in a blaze of glory. So your character embraces death and goes out in a blaze of glory. Take 1 action at the GM's discretion, which critically succeeds, and then cross through the veil of death. So you can be like, okay, that's it. That's fair enough. They die. This was their time. But man, am I going to go out swinging. And I think that's really, really cool, especially in a group game, I think. This one, especially in a group game, because you can be like, yep, that's it. But before I go, I'm going to wipe out this boss, or at least, help the rest of my companions make their way through. Really like that. So that's the first option. The second option is avoid death. Now, if you're not ready to die, and often I find death an issue in solo games, especially when I'm building some big, cool story, I want the threat of death to be there because it is important, I think. But I don't want to die if the story's not finished or if there's not a way that I can satisfyingly keep it moving. There's another nice thing I read in a rule book somewhere about having a companion is that, I think it was Forbidden Lands, having a companion. If your PC dies, maybe the story is actually about the companion and how they impact the world, and it was sort of like their backstory of how they got there. And so the world is already set up. They have now this baggage of having lost their mentor or friend or partner or whatever. And so that's a cool idea too. Avoid death as your second death move. What this does is you drop unconscious and you work with the GM to describe how the situation worsens. So the situation is going to get worse. You drop unconscious. If you're the last one there, being the solo player, maybe you get captured, maybe both of you get captured, maybe your friend gets captured and you wake up in an empty room, that kind of thing. So that can be really fun, cool to move the story along in an unexpected way as well. Because critically, when your character is unconscious, they can't be targeted by an attack, they can't be harmed, and they return to conscious when an ally clears 1. So there's a chance for to get them back up if you have an ally, another reason to have an ally. And B, they're not going to die. You choose, I'm not ready to die, and then your character doesn't die. You do get scars then, which you can also work into the narrative. It might be an emotional scar. You cross out one of your hope slots, and you can work with the GM for it to be healed. Maybe you need a quest of revenge to take out the guy that, whatever. So I really like that it's built in there that there is a way to avoid death if you're not ready for it with your character, but it does still have consequences, and those consequences can and should be narratively interesting. The third option you have is the risk it all option, and this is also cool. If you don't know, if you want to gamble on it, you don't know if you're ready to die or not, and you just want to leave it up to the fate of the gods, of the dice gods. You roll your dice. If hope is higher, you stay on your feet. You clear an amount of hit points and stress equal to the value of the hope die. So that could be quite a lot. Considering a starting player might have 6 hit points, you can, on 2d12s, you can quite happily roll 6. So that's fantastic. You not only survive, you're not... In a lot of games, you come back to 1 hit point and you're limping along and your mates are trying to get you out of a dungeon or something. Here, you can come back and actually keep going and keep fighting. However, if your fear die is higher, you die. Simple as that. Really like it. And if you critically succeed, which in this game is rolling both dice the same, rolling a pair, if you critically succeed, your character stands up and clears all hit points and stress, ready to fight from full recovery. Awesome. Love it. I really like those this death concept in this game. And it does say it is possible to resurrect a dead character, but it's often long, difficult, whatever. That's less exciting to me, less important, unless it creates a big quest or something and a big part of the story for you to go and do it. A quick note on a piece of GM advice that it says, which I know but often have to remind myself of, and maybe you do too, but before you make any single roll, and it's often worded, maybe my issue is it's often worded differently. It often says, if there are consequences, only roll the dice if there are consequences. Otherwise, don't roll the dice. And OSR says that stuff a lot. Here it's worded, only roll the dice, or only perform an action roll if it's interesting to the story. Really simple way to describe it, but I think that is really important. Do you have all the time in the world to try and pick this lock? And think to yourself, if the lock pick fails, is that interesting? What happens? Does the lock break? Does it trigger the guards? Is there a trap? Or yes, they can do it, but you cause some stress, or I don't know. You need to just don't roll. If the person is a thief and they have all the time in the world, they can just pick the lock. Maybe, So I always keep asking yourself, is it interesting to the story? And I think for the solo role player, especially, that advice, is it interesting to the story, is really, really, really important. The second thing it says is make the outcomes clear before the roll. This I'm not sure about for the solo role player, because then it also says, unless the character doesn't know what's going to happen. So maybe just ask yourself, what would my character think is the outcome going to be if I fail? So I'm going to try and swing off that chandelier. If I miss, I'm probably going to land on my back in the middle of a pack of guard dogs. So have an idea of what the failure is going to be, what the outcome is going to be. Another element that stood out to me is a character's experience, and I haven't at all looked at character creation. But my understanding is that a character starts with some prior experience, and you can draw on that experience to add, I think, +2 to your roll. So if my experience is I grew up on the streets, maybe if I'm trying to do something that would make sense growing up on the streets, like, I don't know, like in Game of Thrones, chasing a pigeon or a cat, what was it? Chasing a cat through the alleys, or pickpocketing someone, or trying, if you can explain why your experience in life, why your character's experience would be beneficial for this role, then you can get advantage. That's cool. Or you get +2, whatever it happens to be. I really like that. That's really cool. It encourages you to think about your character and how they would approach a particular action or a particular scene. And anything that helps, for me, the way I like to play at least, anything that helps me constantly be reminded that there is a narrative and a scene and a story going on here, and not just, I need to hit a 12, I didn't hit a 12. What do I do next? That kind of thing. So that's a little thing. I quite like that. It's similar in White Hack as well, which I really love, which basically any experience that you can draw from your background to a action, you just get advantage for. Cool idea. I like it. It's also kind of incorporated into the system I'm working on, where you're building up opportunities that your character can create for themselves based on their experience. Whatever. Story for another time. So the next thing that caught my eye about how to solo roleplay Daggerheart with the mechanics it has is the GM's moves. So In this game, the GM is going to be spending their currency they have, fear, in order to make moves. Now, having this sort of currency isn't entirely new. It's a little bit in Fallout with action points and the 2d20 systems, but it's not everything in Fallout. It really is just, like in my experience when I played Fallout, it's about making an enemy or a GM turn a bit scarier or, a bit more negative for the character, that kind of thing. Whereas here, this is kind of how you're interacting with the characters as the GM, because you're making these moves at specific times, and those times that you make a move is when you roll with fear on an action roll, when you fail, doing something that has consequences, they give you a golden opportunity, or they look to you for what happens next. Okay, the main things I'm interested in here is rolling with fear and failing an action roll, because that gives me, as the solo role player, a clear indication of when I'm switching into GM mode or GM mind frame for that combat. And especially then with the idea I had earlier, if they roll under the number of fear tokens they have, they interrupt unexpectedly and do something, and I think that's really cool, because I really like that you don't, as the player, you're not going to know when the GM has their turn. You're not going to know how many things you can get away with while your luck holds, and you think, my ultimate goal is to get to the top of the staircase, but I want to swing off the chandelier and kick that guy first, jump from him and stab the guy behind them, and then climb up the bookshelf and then get to the top of the thing. And those are 3 cool things I want to do, and I don't know if my luck is going to hold. And so I think it's fun then to plot out, as you might do as a heroic character in a bar fight or whatever, sort of plan out what you're trying to do with the goal, and then bam, you fail, and your mind shifts into GM mode, and they interrupt, and then an enemy takes a turn and stops you in your tracks, that kind of thing. I talked about that already, but yeah, that I think is going to be really interesting to play around with, especially if I make like a random table of what the GM might do. And maybe there's even something here. I mean, it says there are obvious moves, so sometimes it'll just be obvious what to do. But here we go. I didn't even get this far, but there's a list of things that you could do. Here we go. Oh, look at this. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. Okay, it could have been 20. But there are 16 suggestions of what GM move you might make. So I could just roll on that. It might be force the group to split up. Now, that is really great. If we're doing something together, and this is, again, why I think I'll play 2 full characters, but one character is down there in a fist fight with the others, with one other, and another character is climbing up the staircase, swinging on the chandelier, getting to another point, and then I fail or roll with fear, and then roll on the GM move list, and it says force the group to split up. My character at the top turns around to see that the character at the bottom has had the better gotten of her, and she is being dragged out of the room. And then all of a sudden, I have a decision to make. Am I going to keep going for this treasure chest up here, or am I going to go and help my friend? I really like that. Very excited about that. I think that's going to be really cool. And the final thing, I had a couple more notes about the cards and that kind of stuff. Oh yeah, the cards are cool. I haven't actually looked at them yet, but I do like having cards. And it says that you can swap your loadout at rest. I like that as an idea. It sort of gives you that feeling of sort of preparing, and rather than just crossing stuff off and rubbing stuff off on your character sheet, which I often find I just miss things because my eyes glaze over at a big written list, and maybe that's just my concentration issues, but having those cards in my pocket, in my backpack, and then choosing what am I going to take out, and I can't swap them out until I'm resting again, that's cool. I like that. The final thing I noted, which is good for the solo role player, is that the loot is all in a table, and that is excellent. Nothing better than us for having tables, especially when it has things like loots. And it has a cute mechanic where you roll a certain number of, like the table is 60 entries long, and depending on how common, uncommon, rare, or legendary the loot is, you roll a certain number of d20, and the higher up that list you roll, the cooler the loot is. I just like that. That's going to be fun. Maybe there's not that much, or hang on, there is, because there is items, then there's consumables. Okay, and probably there'll be more in supplements and stuff as well. That is the core rules for Daggerheart that really stood out to me as what sort of makes this game different, and that is the first that is all I read when I sat down to learn this game, and this was an hour, which is long for me to do that, just because there was a lot of new stuff. I was really making a point to try and internalize this all formally, to try and lock down the structure of this sort of format of the show. That's all I read, and we are now going to step into the next part of the show, which is where I am going to also look at some rules of mechanic, but now allow myself to begin to form a bit of a setup and world in my head. That could come from pictures that I see that look cool. It could come from locations, a map, or a magical item, a character, anything like that. So I'm still looking at rules, and I'm specifically looking at the way that environments work, and I think it's called campaign frame, I think. And this is the stuff my mate was showing me. I think it's campaign frame. Yeah, campaign frame. I don't know what that is yet. Campaign frames and adversaries and environments. And this is something I have not looked at yet, other than over the shoulder of my mate on his phone on the PDF the other day. But I think that it's going to be really interesting for the solo role player. I'm going to learn those rules as I go, but also allow a bit of a story to start to happen. And that is what we're going to do right after a little break. Let's have a little bit of music, go make another cup of tea, pour another pint, whatever it is, your mead, if you're in full adventure, medieval adventure mode, and we'll come back and look at that shortly. So this next phase of my process, I'm going to still be looking at some of these rules and thinking about how it's going to be useful to the solo role player, but also start to allow myself to flick through the book, look at some pictures, look at some of the setting details, and start to maybe just let some ideas form in my mind as what kind of adventure we might have, or rather what part of the world and what circumstances are going on in the world that can sort of create a framework that I can then go back and, as per your friend and mine, Geek Gamer's advice, then go back and make a character that already makes sense in the world that you've started to put together. We've talked about that before, but it seems counterintuitive. All the books have the character stuff at the beginning, and that's the first thing you do. But you can then sometimes find yourself with a character and then trying to cram the world around them rather than the other way around. And I think that, in my experience, is certainly a better way to do it. So the first thing we're going to look at is adversaries and environments. So using that logic, the first thing I'm going to go to is the environments section and see if we can start to build a bit of an idea of what our part of the world is going to be like. I don't even know what this world is. I'm just assuming high fantasy. I've seen some pictures. There's some, floating castles, jagged mountains, that kind of thing. So I'm not sure it really matters that much. But I'm going to look at these environments, how these environments work, and then start to form a bit of an idea of the part of the world that I'm going to be in. Now, interestingly, in Daggerheart, environments seem to be presented as their own stat block, and that, I think, is really, really cool. So the first thing, I'm just going to pick one out at random and sort of go through it. This one is a bustling marketplace. So what it has is a tier. I don't know what that is, but probably like a level. Oh, here we go. Interesting. So the tier is the amount of challenge, the level of challenge for PCs of a certain tier. So if you use environment stat blocks from other tiers, you might want to adjust their statistics. Okay, and so I guess you're matching the tier of your character and the tier of the environment. Now, actually, I did read about that. I think it's tier 1 is level 1, and then levels 2 to 5 a tier 2, that kind of thing. So it has these nice little ranges to help you sort of scale what you're doing, I guess. So this is a tier 1 social, and it says the economic heart of the settlement with local artisans, traveling merchants, and patrons across social classes. Okay, and then what it has is something called impulses. And the impulses are the sort of how they push and pull those within them. They don't have volition, but the people and forces that comprise an environment gravitate towards certain goals and actions, such as a river rushing to carry you away or drown you, or a casino disorienting and pushing people to gamble away their money. This is all really useful stuff. So the impulses for the bustling marketplace are buy low, sell high, tempt and tantalize with wares from near and far. So as a GM or as a solo role player, straight away that gives me a bit of an image. I'm picturing your typical sort of medieval bustling marketplace with lots of shouting going on, special offer, come buy a rug, that kind of thing. Tempt and tantalize with wares from near and far. Maybe there is a shop which is one of those back room kind of shops, which is suspiciously empty considering there is so much going on outside, and there is some very suspect looking wizened old shopkeeper in there beckoning a finger to come and check out the real secret rare wares out the back of the shop, that kind of thing. It then gives you a difficulty level if characters are making a role in there to do something. That's also nice for the solo role player because it gives you something to base it on. And what I would probably do is look at that difficulty level and then ask myself, is it more difficult than that, less difficult than that? Or ask the Oracle, is it more difficult than that? And then bump it up to the next level, that kind of thing. So you don't know exactly what you're going for. You might even want to roll first. No, I don't think so. I think you'd choose the target number and then roll. In this bustling marketplace, it gives us potential adversaries, guards, bladed guard, head guard, masked thief, merchant. And some of the features, there is the tip the scales. PCs can gain advantage on a presence roll by offering a handful of gold as part of the interaction. Okay, so that ties into the bribery and buy low, sell high, tempt and tantalize sort of thing. Unexpected find. As an action, you can reveal to the PCs that one of the merchants has something they want or need. Okay, cool. Sticky fingers. A thief tries to steal something from the PC. So on, and then crowd closes in. When one of the PCs splits from the group, the crowd shifts and cuts them off from the party. So you could actually incorporate this into your GM move type thing. When you're rolling to do something in the marketplace, do we see anything that is useful to us? And then if that's a yes, we can just scan down here and say, oh yeah, look, there is something useful to us. Or you could do it when you succeed with fear or fail with fear or fail an action in general. You could roll on this and sort of see what is the thing in the environment that frames the outcome of that failure and that GM action. So that's really cool. Say I'm picturing okay, I've been reading The Witcher again. I've been continuing to read The Witcher, and there's I'm at the part of the books where, if anyone knows The Witcher, Ciri has disappeared, essentially. She's not where anyone thinks she is, and she's been off with a group of ragtag youths who are known as the Rats, I think, and they run around basically stealing what they can and having a great time and just getting up to all sorts of mischief, sort of Lost Boys sort of thing, not caring, not having any responsibilities or anyone to tell them what to do, that kind of thing. I'm kind of picturing at the moment, and this may change, but at the moment I'm picturing two characters who are young, and they're kind of these kinds of people. They're street urchins. They're not full-blown thieves necessarily, although maybe, and they're not full beggar, poor street urchins, but probably I think they maybe ran away from wealthier backgrounds or maybe even noble backgrounds somehow, and they're just really, really good at whatever it is they do, and they make an excellent team when it comes to swindling and even fighting, or at least slipping away from situations, that kind of thing. So I could have these two walking through the city, and they're maybe on the lookout for someone they could swindle, or where they could maybe steal a bit of gold. Maybe they are thieves. I also have never really done a city setting, and that makes me nervous because that means like a lot of NPCs and stuff to handle, but maybe we give it a go. So I'm picturing these two characters who are sort of maybe looking for their next mark in this bustling marketplace, and then I maybe roll to do something like, in fact, let's just give it a live example. Man, I definitely need to get some special D12s for this game. I actually don't have 2 D12s on me. I'm going to roll 2 D20s and I'm just going to re-roll if it's over 12. I know that, whatever. Doesn't matter. So let's say that we're going to see, like, can we spot anything? Can we spot an easy mark? Now, not having looked at the characters, I don't know how stats work, but let's assume I'm going to look at a... flick back to some characters now and look at maybe a thiefy type character and see what sort of stats they might have. Ranger, rogue, guardian, beast form. Ooh, druid. Interesting. Let's see what a rogue has. So let's say they have... I don't know, let's say they have +2. I think your stats sort of scale from... Oh, here we go. A sorcerer here. An example character. So yeah, I'm looking at example sorcerer here, and in instinct they have +2, a couple of +1s, -1. So let's say we have a +2 in instinct, street instinct. Good. Okay, and I'm going to say that it said that the difficulty around here is 10. I'm going to ask my oracle, is it more difficult than 10? The answer is yes, and the blue dice is higher. So yeah, we're just going to go up a bracket from 10. So let's say it's 12. Difficulty is 12. I've got a +2. I'm rolling 2d12s here. In theory, we have a 4 and a 6. That is 10 plus 2 is exactly 12. So we do manage to get the result, but with fear, okay? Because the blue dice was higher. I'm going to say that's fear. So we're looking around. Is there something? Do we spot something here? Do we spot an opportunity? And yes, we do. We succeed the spot, but something happens with fear. So now what I could do is roll on the GM moves. So I just rolled on the list of example GM moves, and the thing that came up was shift the environment. So then we could ask, and I'm not going to do this now as a live example, really, because I'm going to do that when I actually play. But say now I would maybe roll an oracle and say, what is the opportunity we see? Maybe it is someone is very drunk outside a tavern and they're sort of like arguing to, trying to bet people in arm wrestles or something like that. And they're sort of throwing their gold around a bit. And so maybe the complication, as it were, for succeeding with fear, shift the environment. I was going to say maybe we lose sight of them, but now that I have this image of this drunken ruffian who's got more money than sense, I'm thinking that the fear is that not only do we spot this easy mark, but we also spot another thief going up to do the exact same thing as us, and all of a sudden we have competition. Okay, so now we can see that already sets up a cool opening scene, for example. That could be the opening scene for my story, and I don't even know who my characters are yet. And that's really cool, because when I go back and I go to build those characters now, I can kind of figure out who they are based on the environment they're in and create characters that make more natural sense in this world that we're building. So that's cool. I really like that environment stuff. Now, the next thing I'm going to flick over to, which I don't think I did mention, maybe I did, is the campaign frames to get an idea of what the greater world is going to be. So it says here that the idea of a campaign frame is that it's an optional tool that you can use to build up a campaign. And it has a series of steps that you go through in order to kind of set that up. And so that includes pitching the campaign to your players, or, this we would use sort of differently, obviously, as a solo player, but pitching the campaign to your players, setting up the foundations, brainstorming with your players the kind of characters. Actually, this is good. This tells you, this sort of actually suggests what I'm saying, that you should sort of start looking and talking about the campaign before they're building their characters, even if it's a new campaign. And then you have an inciting, a session 0 to build the characters, create a map, and then you begin the adventure with an inciting incident, which is what we're sort of doing. And then it goes through and it looks like it has a bunch of, like reasonably sized chunks, like maybe 6 or 8 pages of a campaign backdrop. I like that. It's a bit, but it's not enough. Like it looks to me like it is spaced out enough that you can sort of give you an overall idea, but you're not following like an adventure. It doesn't look like necessarily. It looks like there's gaps between everything, which is exactly what we, or at least I, want. So we have something called the Witherwild. That is So this is like some sort of rich forested sort of area, which has been always a place of abundance and peace, but now there's something threatening it. An unlikely, dangerous bloom known as the Witherwild. That's cool. But I already have a foresty campaign going on at the moment. Or two, actually, between Dolmenwood and Forbidden Lands. So the next thing is Burning Banners. So this is long brewing tension between rival nations, threatening all out war. That could work, and maybe we get sucked into a bigger conflict, maybe drafted into the army, something like that. There's Beast Feast. When a small village's monster defense system fails, the local heroes must venture into endless caverns below to fix it. That could be cool, too. Maybe we get arrested then and sent out as sort of fodder to try and take out this beast, something like that. Really liking this as a concept so far. And within those frames, they have an exciting incident, which I guess is optional. They have the campaign mechanics. So you actually... Interesting, you actually build your character specifically for one of these. And so it says, in this Beast Feast campaign, here are some primary weapons that you would start with. As everyday heroes with no access to standard weapons, PCs must choose their Tier 1 starting equipment from the following tables instead of the normal equipment list. Interesting, so you've got like a pitchfork or a skillet or a butcher's axe, cooking knife, rather than broadsword and that kind of thing. So really like that idea. It instantly puts your characters in the right setting, or at least marries your characters and the setup of the campaign together. The Age of Umbra is a dying world immersed in relentless shadow and nightmarish monsters. Yeah. Apocalypse themes. Apocalypse, corruption, darkness, light and hope. Not sure about that for if we were to go with these roguey, thiefy characters. I'd like something in a city. Motherboard. In a world where magic takes the form of technology left behind by a long-fallen civilization, a new threat rises as a malicious virus spreads to the machines under the waste. I don't like machines in my fantasy generally, but that's a cool, like, mega city looking type thing. Machinery. So this is interesting. It doesn't seem to have a set world necessarily. Oh wow, and there's even... This is interesting, and why it's called Motherboard. It has all these code, which is like... wow, that's super nerdy in a good way. All this like tech code, which looks like electronic schematics that you have to learn, I guess, and figure stuff out. That's really niche, but really cool. Colossus of the Drylands, a prosperous region of gunslingers, outlaws, and outlaws has fallen into terror as colossal creatures awaken from beneath the earth. That could be it. That looks sort of western-y. What else have we got here? Man, I can absolutely see a lot of expansion potential just with these campaign frames. Wow, that's a big one. Okay, that's all of them. So to me, the thing that I'm feeling sort of standard medieval fantasy stuff. So I'm looking at maybe either Beast Feast, where it is for a small village, and maybe we just have some annual festival in our village or something, which is why the marketplace is so bustling at the moment. And then maybe there is a... Maybe that's the inciting incident. We're sort of involved in this little bit of thievery, and then at some stage, because the monster defense system has failed, the monster crops up and breaks up the celebrations and the marketplace and the festivities and starts like crashing through things and whatever. Let's see what this monster might be. Okay, this is literally about... it says the party will create a cookbook together as they play through the campaign frame. That's interesting. Not sure that's what I want out of this. It literally is about eating a beast. Okay. I'm not sure about any of these straight away necessarily. Maybe the war. And then it would give you this information before character creation, which basically tells you of the key players in the war. And so maybe that's it. Maybe we get drafted into this army then, or something like that. So yeah, that's the campaign frames. I really like that. That's a really cool idea. I would also feel totally happy ignoring that and just going out and doing whatever. But this is nice because it at least even if you're only going to loosely pull bits and pieces from it, I think that's still nice, because between this and the environment stat blocks, I think you can sort of pull various things. This has the big questions. Does power always corrupt? In what ways is the road to disaster paved with good intentions? What does governance look like? How do you decide who to protect and uplift? How do you manage divided loyalties without betraying someone? Yeah. So maybe these two are brother and sister and from some sort of royal or one of these bigger factions, and they're sort of, they're not doing any major harm out in this city with their pickpocketing and whatnot. But they're not really interested in the larger machinations of what's going on in the world, and then they get called to order as the war kicks off. Something like that. So the next thing I'm going to look at is to look at the adversaries chapter. And this is what my mate showed me the other day. And this really stood out to me for a couple of reasons. One, simple stat blocks. Now, I never played D&D, so I don't really, people talk about how big and complex and those stat blocks are and how refreshing it is to have OSR stat blocks. I've always pretty much had simple stat blocks. And so yeah, but I think it is a good thing. So say we have now, here we go, we have the Jagged Knife Bandit. So this could be our competition that we see in the marketplace. Tier 1 standard, so it gives you a tier. It gives you a really brief description. A cunning criminal in a cloak bearing one of the gang's iconic knives. Okay, good. So that straight away gives us, right, there's a gang. What is the gang? And that gives us, either as the GM or solo role player, questions to answer to help flesh out this sort of world. And then it has your standard, your difficulty, it has your damage thresholds, hit points, stress, like stress maximum, attack, weapons, that kind of thing. And their experience as a thief, so they get +2 to any rolls, including thievery. But what it also has is moves and tactics, and that is really, really nice. This is what piqued my interest when my mate showed me this, because as the GM, but also as the solo role player, it gives you flavor about what the adversary is, how the adversary is going to behave. And like some of those games like Dragonbane or even Crown and Skull, where you roll to see what the enemy does, that's really useful in solo role-playing. So you're not constantly trying to play off against yourself and switching back and forth too quickly between the GM and player brain. And so this says escape, profit, steal, throw, smoke, for example. So when I roll and say we're going to see if we can close in on the thief, so one of us can go and close in on the thief and interfere and interrupt him, so the other one can get in and do the thieving. So we could say, yeah, okay. The difficulty then, the action is then still related to the environment. So say whatever that happens to be, whatever the trait is, agility. So trying to slip your way through the crowd in between all the gaps and get there quick enough before he sort of spots you and manages to get out of the way. And so we're going to say it was 10 was the standard difficulty. We're going to ask, we can just accept that as 10. Let's say it's 10. We roll our 2d12s. We get a 6 and a 9, which is 15, so plenty. So we get 17 on that, say, with fear being higher, however, though. So this is a perfect example. So yes, we managed to get there and distract and interfere with the thief, one of us, while the other one gets to go in, or the other one would then take their turn. But because we rolled with fear, it means that the GM gets a fear point, and it's going to interrupt the spotlight. And so now that thief is going to do something, and they could escape, profit, steal, or throw smoke. I don't know, so I'm going to roll a d4. And that is profit. So we're going to try and do this. And so maybe, for example, the thief tries to figure out a way to, he figures out what's going on, what we're trying to do, and he seeks to profit from the situation. Or perhaps he goes into to grab this bag and we both get exposed, and all of a sudden we're fighting alongside the thief. I don't know, something like that. So those moves and tactics, I think, are really interesting. And you wouldn't have to roll on it all the time. You could just look at it and say, okay, escape. He's going to try and escape, if that makes sense, or rather, if that makes for a good story. So that's the adversaries. Features. He's a climber. The bandit climbs just as easily as they run. Great. So that tells me if he is escaping, what's he doing? Well, he goes straight up the wall onto the roof and starts running off the rooftops. And he's stolen our purse, for example. And so now we're chasing him across the rooftops because he took advantage of us trying to take advantage of him. And we now have a cool scene where we're chasing along the rooftops this thief. And so really, really cool. This is the thing that piqued my interest and made me want to pull this book out and start looking at it now. So that is it for my first look of Daggerheart. I think this is a really, really, really interesting book. And what I really like about it is with a single book here, you've got everything you need, other than the cards, which I didn't look at now, but that's okay. This single book here, you've got everything you need. I could just sit down with this book and my microphone or my notebook, a couple of dice. I need to get some fancy D12s for this game. I might go into town now and see if I can find a couple of D12s that I want to use for my hope and fear. And I'm going to roll up some characters and start this adventure. That will likely be coming to the show here on the main platform, and then if I continue the adventure, that happens out over on the Patreon stuff over there. Tell me what you think about Daggerheart. Have you had any experience playing it solo? What was it like? What can you recommend? Do you have any tips and tricks? Send me an email over at soloroleplayerspodcast@gmail.com, or you can send me a speak pipe, which is even better. If you look into the show notes, look up the speak pipe and just record me a short message, and also let me know in that message if you would be happy for me to put that on the show. And yeah, let's see what happens with Daggerheart. I'm certainly excited to give it a try. I'm not playing all of my games on mic anymore because I'm playing a lot of games concurrently, and there is only so many podcasts I can release. Thank you for being here and joining me for this first look episode of Daggerheart on the Solo Roleplayers podcast. If you want to get in touch with me, I've just told you how you can do that. And otherwise, if you want to support me, you can tell a friend. Tell a friend about solo role-playing. Tell them what a great hobby it is. Point them over to the podcast and see if it can help them get going. It's wonderful having other people to share ideas in this hobby, both solo and more broadly in RPG. Tell a friend, send me an email, send me a speak pipe. If you really want to support me, then the best thing, of course, is to go over to the Patreon, which just would warm my heart. Not only that, though, it's a really fantastic community over there. We're talking in the Discord all the time. We're sharing advice, experiences, triumphs and challenges and heartbreaks and all sorts of loot that we manage to get. We somehow keeps arriving at our door. And don't forget, there are also double the episodes already available, continuing all those stories I've done before. And if I play through more Daggerheart, that's where they will appear as well. That is Patreon/Solo Roleplayers. And other than that, just get out there, get a book off your shelf, and continue or start a new adventure. Thank you again for being here, and I'll see you next time on the Solo Roleplayers podcast. Bye.